August is Women's Month, and we at the station are showcasing powerful and resilient women. These are people who have gone through incredible trauma or change in their life, and they have come back better and stronger. This is Beautiful Makeup. Not many people know the name Olivia Jasriel. A lot of people know the name S01. She was one of the first people to lay charges of child abuse against Bob Hewitt. She changed her name, she changed her life, and today she is our interview on Beautiful Makeup. So I'm sitting here with you as Olivia Jasriel, and when I first met you and interviewed you, you were Olivia Jasriel. But a lot of people watching would know you as something else entirely, S01. And you're one of the original, I don't even want to say complainants because that's not right. It's one of the first people to come forward about what you had gone through with Bob Hewitt.
I was the first person in this country. Yes,
yeah.
After the trial, my life pretty much fell apart. It took me about 8 months to pull myself together and sort of get out there again. And I started going for interviews because I actually couldn't work for about a year before the trial and then obviously during the trial. And when I started looking for work again, I went to an employment agency, and as I walked in the door, she recognized me from the newspaper. I'd been in the newspaper the week before, and she told me that I was unemployable because of what I had done. Wow. She said, "You've gone through the whole court process, you've put a man in jail for raping you, you could be perceived as being a little bit unstable." And I had been playing around with the thought of changing my name for many, many years, actually. And I think that was just sort of the cherry on the cake. Within 3 weeks of changing my name, I got a new job.
I'm going to take you back. I want to go back to what you said about how your life fell apart after the trial, and we'll go to that. But I want to take you back to when you were being coached by Bob Hewitt, famous Bob Hewitt, golden man of tennis. And there you were, lucky S01, who'd made it onto that incredible coaching court.
Yes.
And you weren't so lucky at all.
No, I actually wasn't. And, you know, he had approached me, so that for my family, for me, was a huge thing.
When you were going to be coaching with him, what did that mean?
Well, I had seen him playing at Wimbledon on TV. I knew that he was this famous person. I knew that he had played in the Davis Cup. I knew he was Australian. I actually knew quite a lot about him. And then one day I saw him, and everybody was whispering, "Bob Hewitt's here." And I still remember he had this blue Saab, and it was a convertible. And I remember the day that he came, I was at Ellis Park, and he was standing by his car, and he's a big man. He must be about 6'4". And he had such a presence about him. And I remember him watching me, and I remember he was at the courts because we were at Ellis Park for a full week. And he was just there all the time. And then he approached me. He approached me and asked me if I wanted him to coach me. And I was 10. I was like, it's not a decision I could make, you know. And I suggested he speak to my mom, which obviously he did. And before I knew what had hit me, I was with him. At the beginning of the year that I turned 11, he asked my folks if he could take me to the States with him in the December of that year to go and play the Orange Bowl. Huge tournament. I mean, we would start down at the bottom of Florida, work up the coastline, end up at the Rolex Open in New York. Huge tournament. And she allowed me to go with him. And that was where, let's call it, the stuff started.
So did you feel conflicted in any way? Because you talk about the stuff, and even now, I can see it's hard for you to bring up.
Yeah. So, I mean, initially, obviously, the first time that it actually really happened, which was when I was in America, I wasn't quite sure what had happened. I very much questioned myself. So what happened was, we were in New York, and he called our room. There were 4 girls that went with him, and I think there were 12 boys. He phoned our room and he asked that I please go and fetch my pocket money. Okay. So I went on my own. When I got to the room, he was lying on his bed naked with a briefcase just covering his waist, and he had my pocket money, which was $5 at that time. And I still remember he was white down the side of his body. And he's, funny enough, his wife was actually in the room as well. So I kind of knew something was not right, but I went back to the room, and the other girls, one by one, went and fetched their pocket money, but nothing was ever said. Okay. So, yeah, it wasn't right, but I didn't quite know how to verbalize what I had just experienced.
Especially with his wife in the room.
Yeah, you know, yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I probably would have shot him, but if I was his wife. But yeah, you know, it's still very, for me, it's just odd. Yeah. But at the time, it was also odd, but I was 11 years old. So, and obviously when we got back, that was when the grooming started, and he sat me down and told me that my mom had told me to, had asked him to speak to me about what he referred to as the birds and the bees. I remember having a 2-hour discussion with him about the intricate details of sex while I should have been practicing. But having said that, it was still amazing to be around him. He also went around the whole process of making me feel very special. The whole time, from day dot that I met him, he was actually telling me what he was going to do to me. I just didn't know it.
Then it accelerated. Tell me about the afternoon of the tennis tournament.
It was a Tuesday afternoon. He fetched me from school. It was winter, and on the road to ERPM Tennis Club, I think it should have been about a 30-minute drive. We pretty much got there in 20 minutes. He started talking to me about sex. He asked me to touch him. I did. He essentially told me what he was going to do to me. He told me that in order for me to grow as a woman and to improve and grow as a tennis player, he needed to have sex with me. We got to the tennis club. I still remember the sound of the car's wheels going over the stones. It's something that still triggers me. And we parked under the trees. There was nobody in sight. He asked me to remove my panties, and I did remove my panties. And he had sex with me. How long it lasted, I have absolutely no idea. I remember terror, fear, excruciating pain. If it lasted 7 seconds or 70 seconds or 7 minutes, I have no idea. But when he was done, and I do remember looking up, and at some point I started looking for the groundsman. His name was Temba, and he was nowhere to be found. And when Bob was done, he said, "Go and get cleaned up, the people are going to start arriving." And the clubhouse was open, so Temba must have been somewhere. I went and I cleaned up as best I could. It was a pretty horrible afternoon. I played tennis that afternoon. I had my 4 hours of coaching. I remember I had this horrible smell that just followed me around the whole afternoon. I did not change sides on the same side as anybody. If we changed sides of the tennis court, I would go the other way because I didn't want anybody to smell me. And it's a smell that lives with me to this day. Wow. I was with him for about 4 years after that, and it was pretty much continuous, yeah.
Question I know that gets asked often is, why did you wait so long? Why didn't you tell your parents? Why didn't you speak to your friends?
I did try and tell my mom. Okay. About 2 weeks after it happened, and she rubbished me. She just said to me, "Ach, rubbish," and we carried on. He had told me that day, that Tuesday afternoon, that nobody would believe me. And the other thing that he said was he could get into a lot of trouble. There was that element, and then obviously when I told my mom and she rubbished me, there was the element of nobody's going to believe you. We often get asked, why did we wait so long? We actually didn't wait so long. Criminal charges were laid against him by one of the complainants, Twiggy Tolkien, in 1980. It did get to court, but the prosecutor advised that they withdraw the case. She was 13 years old or 12 years old at the time. He was a 40-year-old man. You can imagine how that would have gone in the courtroom. And her dad withdrew the charges. He was molesting one of my best friends at school. I obviously didn't know it at the time. It came out a few years later when we were at varsity. And over the years, we spoke about it. You know, you'd mingle with people in the tennis group. It would come up. It would get buried. So it was always there. We just didn't know we could do anything about it.
So when you did do something about it, what triggered that?
7 months, 8 months before, the November before I spoke publicly, I had tried to commit suicide. And it was while I was in hospital recovering from a really, really bad car accident. I was in such a state, going to do what I was going to do.
You were on your way there.
That, yeah, I actually had a head-on collision with a taxi. In hindsight, maybe I needed to have that. But while I was in hospital, I found myself an amazing psychiatrist and a psychologist, and everything just came pouring out. At the same time that I was going through this, there was a woman in America going through the same thing as what I was going through. And she had contacted the Boston Globe. And in the June of 2011, I also got a very bizarre phone call one afternoon from my very first boyfriend at school. Jimmy used to call me Sui. And he said, Sui, I need to ask you something. And I said, ja. And he said, did Bob ever do anything to you?
Sure.
And before I even registered what he had said, yes, shot out my mouth. And Graham said to me, he's not going to ask me anything further, but he's got a reporter from the Boston Globe with him in his office. This gentleman would like to speak to me. Would I be interested in speaking to him? And I don't think I was really all that sure still what was coming, but you know, I took the call and I spoke to Robert Holer, and he told me about that he had been in touch with Heather Connor Crow in the States, and he wanted to know about my experiences with Hewitt, and it just grew into this massive thing.
But now, originally, it wasn't about pressing charges against him here. It was about getting him out of the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
Yes. So in America, there was a statute of limitations of, I think it was 15 years, or maybe even could have been 20 years. In South Africa, there was also a statute of limitations of 20 years. So we couldn't really lay criminal charges per se. So the story broke on the 1st of September 2011 here in South Africa. It broke on the 28th of August 2011 in the States. And we decided that probably the best thing that we could do was have him removed from the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
That was what you reckoned was open to you at the time.
Yes, and that was probably like the most we could do, because we didn't believe that he belonged. It wasn't about being vindictive. We did not believe that he belonged there. Okay. That was our thinking. And the Tennis Hall of Fame came back to us, and they said that they would not investigate unless we pressed criminal charges. And then in November, I woke up one morning and I was like, to hell with this. Yeah. I'm going to go and lay charges against him. And I phoned a reporter that I trusted. And between the two of us, we actually found a police station that we felt was the most equipped
to deal with it,
to handle what we were about, or what I was about to do.
Because this was a real test case at the time.
Well, it was the first time it had ever been done. So it's known as an historical case. So yes, you know, we were going to test the system. We were going to test the statute. We were going to. It was. I mean, really, we didn't think we were going to go anywhere. They wanted a criminal case. I went and opened up a criminal case. Went to Honeydew Police Station. It was a hell of a morning, but they were great about it. And I gave the International Tennis Hall of Fame a case number. In the meanwhile, it had started being investigated here in South Africa. South Africa let us down horribly. The case was transferred to Boksburg Police Station, which is where my incident happened. The investigating officer made one phone call to one of the other victims. She didn't answer the phone, and he closed the file.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but obviously now there was a case. The International Tennis Hall of Fame had started investigating. I had started a petition, which got 294 people came forward on that petition with addresses, telephone numbers, incidents that they knew of or had happened to them. And all in all, 72 girls wrote statements.
Wow.
So the International Tennis Hall of Fame launched this huge investigation, and it pretty much spanned the circumference of the planet.
But I also know it was a very lonely time and a very isolating time.
Here we go. My family had disowned me completely. My mom had rubbished me further. The Tennis Federation had pretty much rubbished us. It was beyond horrible. Yes. And I at one point said that I was going to treat this whole thing like a tennis match. And every ball that came at me, I was going to get it back. And I'm sure that's a lesson he regrets teaching me.
You had really punished your body a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
afterwards.
I tried to commit suicide probably about 6 or 7 times. And everything, it was always related to abandonment, self-esteem. And I think a lot of it was just self-hate because of what I had done. And because he was my first love. Yeah. And when I say that to people, they sort of like look at me a bit oddly. But as far as I was concerned, in that world, I was special to him. He was very special to me.
And you were the only one.
I was the only one, and we had this relationship. And even though I'd left him when I was about 15, 16 years old, I still continued to bump into him around the world, you know. So in my travels, playing tennis, doing whatever, I would bump into him. I would see him. Until one day he turned his back on me.
Wow.
And it devastated me.
So I want to take you back to the beginning of us chatting, where you said that after the trial your life fell apart. Because from the outside, the guilty conviction, it was a short prison sentence because of his age. And yet he was going to jail. So from an outside perspective, you could be forgiven for thinking this should have been a hugely joyful time for you. You had been vindicated. He had been found guilty. No one could accuse you of just saying these things anymore. So why isn't that what happened? Why wasn't it big party time? What happened?
I came to the realization because he wasn't convicted and he went to jail. He was convicted, there were several postponements until he was sentenced. After he was sentenced, he appealed the sentence. That went to the Supreme Court of Appeal. So there was a whole another year and a half before he actually did go to prison. But what I realized was the people that were supporting me and there for me actually weren't. They were there strategically placing themselves next to me in the courtroom, strategically placing themselves next to me when there were cameras, and gaining a lot from my trauma and my drama. I then had the added trauma, if you want to call it that, of wanting to celebrate and people saying to me, but he's an old man, why don't you just leave him alone? I mean, again, my parents had testified against me in the trial. That was exceptionally traumatic. I left the trial feeling pretty broken, and people don't want to be around broken people.
You got your life back on track,
Yes.
and he was in jail, and nobody would have blamed you for going, you know what, I've done my bit, but I'm hanging up my spurs, and I'm retiring from this maelstrom.
Yes.
But you didn't do that.
So people started contacting me through social media, through newspapers, through radio, wanting advice from me.
What kind of advice? What were they telling you?
People were asking me. I was getting a lot of questions about how do you get to the court process? Okay. What do we do from here? Essentially, what happened was I turned into a support system for other victims, without me even knowing it. I was thrown back into it, but now from a position of I'm a survivor, I'm a warrior, I'm an expert in my field, and suddenly I can help people. I've become somebody that people used to look down upon. I was this crazy woman that was trying to do something that just couldn't be done, to now people look up to me, people phone me, I do motivational talks, I'm going to be lecturing at UJ. yeah, all this good stuff is starting to happen. You know, my opinion now counts.
We were chatting last year. I think it was last year. Was it around this time? He was trying to have a sentence commuted to house arrest.
Yeah.
It was around
It
this
was
time.
actually, yeah, it was in September.
So
yes.
Close.
It was the 20th of September. I got an SMS from the investigating officer to say he's applying for parole.
But it never occurred to me that, and I'm using this word deliberately, the victim of something like this would have to pay to put their case. So
Yes.
tell me how this process works
Okay.
for you. What your experience is going to be in September. What do you have to do?
Okay. So I'm going to go back to last year.
Okay.
Because last year was hectic.
Okay.
So I was at a tennis tournament. I was about to walk on to play the finals of my singles, and I got this SMS. It put me in a meltdown. I was off the court in half an hour. I don't
Can't
think I even
believe
got
that.
a point. Yeah. I was like, no. Yeah. Okay. So runner up in that tournament. Didn't go well. So he was convicted in Johannesburg. For all intents and purposes, he should have gone to prison in Gauteng. I think Sun City would have been his new home. Because he's from Port Elizabeth and his businesses are down in Port Elizabeth and his family live down there, they actually somehow managed to get the judge to say it's okay, and he's now in St. Albans prison in Port Elizabeth. So when I got the information that he was applying for parole, our immediate response was he's only been in prison for 2 years, so no, he can't have parole because you're only allowed parole at 50% of your time. We are going to fight this. In order to fight this, we needed attorneys. I needed an attorney because nobody else was really on board with me. So I needed an attorney. I didn't believe that sending a piece of paper down with how this has affected me would suffice. It was about 2.5 months of a bucket load of work to keep him in prison.
All on you?
All on me. He was denied his application, but we were told he was going to apply for parole in September now, on the 20th. And I've been preparing since January. You know, we've been told we can submit paperwork and the parole board will read it and make a decision. I don't believe that is the way it should be done. I need to go down there. I need to keep him where he rightfully belongs. I've been served a life sentence. 3 years doesn't even cut it. He's in prison. I have to work. I have to keep a roof over my head. I had to rebuild my life from nothing. When I heard about the parole application last year, I got burnout. By December, I was violently ill. I've been in and out of hospital the whole year, so I'm holding down a job. I'm trying to get my health under control, and that's purely stress. It's got nothing to do with me not looking after myself or anything. It's just everything on top of each other, and I get no assistance. He gets state lawyers, he flies around or drives around, or however he gets around. He goes to doctors, he's got it all. I don't understand how that works. I don't actually understand how that works.
What would you like to see happen if the law could change in any way? And we're not waving a magic wand here.
Okay.
What would you like to see changing in terms of what happens after a trial like this to victim and to predator?
First and foremost, we managed, well, not we. I set a ball in motion. The Frankel 8 came forward. They actually got the statute of limitations abolished.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic, because now you can report abuse when you are ready. And believe me, it takes years. Yeah. I would very, very much like to see that sexual offenders do not get parole. I think they are very lightly sentenced here in this country, and I don't believe that they can be rehabilitated. So I don't think that they should be given parole. They should stay in prison. What is severely lacking is aftercare.
Yeah.
So I suffer from severe PTSD, not as a result of what he did to me, as a result of the trial. And having to relive all of that, and obviously all the stuff that I went through, and I'm sure that all the other girls do as well. we get no aftercare. There should be psychologists. I think that we should be given the same treatment that a prisoner gets in terms of looking after ourselves.
So people listening to this and watching this, a question's going to be coming up for them going, why would I report this? Surely she wouldn't expect me to. And you can see what happened to her, and she wasn't believed. So you tell me what keeps you fighting so that they've got something to go, well, even though all that happened to her, I'm still going to report it because. What's there because?
The more people that speak out, the smaller the world becomes for these people to hide. By reporting this and dealing with this and getting to where I have gotten, I would do it again.
Wow.
In light of, you know, how my life has just changed for the better and how I have become a better person. I'm back on the tennis court.
That was going to be my next question.
Yes.
And really hitting it hard.
I'm hitting it hard. I'm in the top 10. I'm nailing it. Within the first year of me being back in tournaments, I was in the top 10. I was number 7. So that for me, you know, I got my letter to say that I'm on the short list to make Worlds. That for me was amazing. Wow. So yeah.
So you've got the joy back in something.
Yes. You know, I have received Achiever of the Year awards at work. I've been headhunted. I've been stolen. I mean, it's wonderful. You know, so I'm just doing great on every level. I have my son back in my life, which for me was my all and everything because I truly believed I'd never see him again. And it's all good stuff. And I have just lived it. And people look at me and they say, my God, I can't believe this is the same person I was looking at 5 years ago.
So then let me ask you another question. If you've managed to do this against all odds, with everything against you, but you're back, you're on the tennis court, you're happy, reunited with your son, you've got that sense of personal respect and pride back. Someone might say, well, you're over it, Shirley. Can you not just let it go?
You don't just get over it. People that now say, just get over it, I say to them, if I was your daughter and that was done to me, would you expect to just to get over it? Something my dad said in court, and he still laughed when he said it, was, she must just get over it. She's a grown woman. You don't just get over it. I am now 50 years old. I bath in bleach. 2, 3 times a day, if I can. It's not as bad as it used to be, where it was half a bottle, maybe a couple of cups of bleach. It's just a couple of caps now. But that's how I feel clean. I scrub myself with brushes. I scrub myself with salt. I scrub myself with sugar, anything that I can find that's rough. And that's only to get clean.
Do you ever see a time when the bleach will go back under the sink and not come out again?
I don't think it ever will, because I'm now onto bleach with potpourri. It used to just be plain bleach. I need that smell. That clean smell, that burn your nose smell is very important in order for me to go to sleep at night.
I think you've rocked this. I really do. So anybody watching this and listening to this who's just kind of thinking, I can't be that strong. I can't do what she did. What do you say to them?
Sam, it's not about being strong. It's about doing what's right. And that's actually just the bottom line. These people that say, oh, I don't want to get involved, not okay. People that say, I knew what they were doing, those people belong in jail. Section 54, if you know of a child that's being abused and you don't report it, you can be held criminally liable. Parents need to be vigilant, they need to be on the ball, and they need to know who they are leaving their children with.
And we need more Olivias.
Yes, but I'm a Gemini, so there are 2 of me.
Thank you, that was brilliant.
Thank you.
Hot 91.9. Playing the best old school and R&B.